Here we go. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Grief and Potluck podcast. It is Book Club 2021. Today we are fortunate to be speaking with author Rachel. I'm going to probably say that wrong. Hauck.
We'll go with Hauck.
Hauck. Super. It is
Yep.
called The Memory House, and she is a New York Times bestselling author. I think you're probably well known for your wedding novellas, if I'm
Yep.
not incorrect there.
Probably The Wedding Dress. Sure. That's the one that hit the New York Times.
All right, super. And the Memory House caught my eye, just so you're aware, Rachel. We were reading a book by you. I'm just going to evade the title because it escapes my short-term memory right now. And I was like, I need to pick another book for 2020. Haha. 2021 book club.
Right.
And I was like, well, this on a morbid line, but it's not morbid, deals with death to a degree, and the 9/11 caught my eye. So, due to the nature of the Grief and Potluck podcast with the website that goes along with it, celebrationsoflifemagazine.com, that kind of struck, like, if you will, the nerve of the general scope of what I did in 2020, and so hence where I continue on in 2021. So, I'm going to give you all the time here, carte blanche, but I'm going to give a synopsis of the back. The lady's name is Beck Holiday. She lost her father in the North Tower on 9/11. She also lost her memory of him. And then 18 years later, she is a New York City cop burdened with a damaging secret, suspended for misconduct, and struggling to get her life in order. Bam, bam, bam. And I love the fact that you put it in Florida, which is where we are literally in Florida.
Yes, we both are.
Yes. So give us an idea of how this book came into fruition, if you will, please.
Oh, I would. Thank you for having me on, too. It's a joy and a pleasure. So, hi, everybody who's listening. This book actually started with me thinking about a house on memory lane. That was the original title, was The House on Memory Lane. And I just thought it was an interesting idea to put a house on a street named Memory Lane, because as you age and we get older, or even in your 20s and you go back to your childhood home, you walk down memory lane. So I was looking for the metaphor, to be honest.
That's
and
nice.
I originally saw two girls, maybe two sisters, going back to a family home, and maybe they inherited, maybe someone died, maybe it was their grandparents, and then whatever drama or story ensued. That's about as far as I got.
Gotcha.
So when I hashed this story out, I was actually Beck's story, or actually, excuse me, this is a split time novel. So
yes.
For everyone who doesn't know what that is, part of it's contemporary and part of it's historical. I had been working on a Depression era Black Sunday idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so Beck that character was a cop. There was a cop in the story. And then there was an older woman, or the historical woman, who was going to deal with everything that happened on Black Sunday. And so I kind of merged those ideas together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was part of it, the historical story, part of it takes place in Waco, Texas in the early 1950s or late 1950s, early 60s. And I was there for a conference. Actually, I was in Dallas for a conference, and I went down to Waco to tour the Magnolia Empire.
Yes.
And we went on the Magnolia tours.
Yay.
And I learned that there was a sudden, unexpected tornado that tore through that town in the 50s. I think it was 1953 or 1952 on Mother's Day. And yes, maybe it's 53. It's on Mother's Day. And it really destroyed the town, and like 137 people died. It was a huge tragedy. Wow. And the storm was hidden inside a thunderstorm. So some people didn't even see it because of all of the rain and the cloudiness. So I said, okay, this is the backdrop for my historical story. And so I just thought I wanted to delve into what is it like when you lose everything and when you lose it suddenly. And so, and then of course, Beck lost her father during 9/11, and then she has a backstory with that. And she was a young girl, but it really impacted her. So that's kind of how. So whenever you start a story idea, you always have these high and mighty ideas of what you're going to do, and then you have to start figuring out how am I going to make that work, and why would anybody care? So then that's when you start digging the story, and that's when it makes all of its changes. And so that was kind of the start of the story. And I loved the title, The House on Memory Lane, but for some reason my publisher kept saying, that sounds like a romance novel. And I'm like, not to me. And they were coming up with all these titles. I said, nope, 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 nope. And then my agent came up with, well, how about The Memory House? And I'm like, okay, fine. That's a good compromise. So there we go.
Yes, yes. Well, and I do like how you tie it together, as it does eventually fall onto a road and there is a house on it, and it is called
Exactly. Yes.
Memory Lane. Hence, ta-da! I know, I'm right there with you, but who knows what these publishers think. Um, Now, the thing I do want to compliment you on 100% is the split time novel. Sometimes it can be difficult in a back and forth, where am I going in this story? But this one was very, very succinct, very, whatever the right word is to say that I'm not putting out there. It was good.
Thank
And
you.
it was very well, placed. So it wasn't like I got lost. I really, because you can. You can
Yeah,
get
of course.
lost
Yeah, sure.
going forwards and backwards. And so kudos to not getting us lost. I feel like it really walked us right in the timelines. It wasn't a mystery as to how it played out. Um, Now the thing I found, of course, very interesting overall, besides not again to be morbid, but the death and the loss and how people cope with it,
Right.
is the fact that she like blanked out with her memory, like the amnesia part, I guess it's called.
Right.
Now,
Temporary amnesia or selective amnesia. Yes.
did you study up on that because of the subject matter, or how did you cope with that for the subject of that character?
Yeah, when I decided I was going to do that, then I read up on it. And of course, if it's plausible, if anything is plausible, then I just run with it. And it was very plausible. Things like this do happen because it was so tragic. This is Everly, who was the historical character who was impacted by this tornado coming in through town.
Mm-hmm.
And so the devastation was so great to her. I felt like her coping mechanism was, I'm just gonna forget some things. And then the contemporary character, she's an adult, but losing her father as a young teen, and then not to give away the story, but
Mm-hmm.
she did blame herself for something.
Mm-hmm.
So for her as a young girl to cope with her loss and her guilt, she really had a lot of guilt. She just forgot anything that was related to her father. She couldn't remember her father. She couldn't remember, and she inherits this house down in Fernandina Beach, Florida. She goes down from New York, and there's a reason why she does that. And she can't remember anything about this house, and she can't remember the friends that she knew there. So that makes an interesting story for her. And so I did look into it, and trauma can, especially death or sudden death, trauma can cause you just, your way of coping is you wipe out your memory, and you wipe out certain memories, not all your memories. So that the
Wow.
human brain and the emotions are so powerful. And originally, Everly, the historical character, was not going to have amnesia. And then I realized, hello, Rachel, you need to bookend this,
Mm-hmm.
because these two characters are going to kind of unite in a unique way in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, man, if Everly has been so devastated by this tornado, I think she would. And then when we open up her story, she's living a very, hey, I'm a widow forever and ever, and she's only 30 years old, but she's living like she's 80. So I decided, in order for her to cope, she has a real interesting battle, don't you think, Ginger? With part of her wants to forget, and part of her doesn't want to forget. She almost feels like, as her story unfolds, she almost feels like it's her responsibility to stay stuck in time to keep her family's memory alive, and keep all the key players in her life alive. And so that was kind of fun to play with when she was battling with, do I move on or do I stay
Mm-hmm.
in this place? And I'm getting an invitation to move on. But if I do, and I think this is something everyone struggles with, especially if you're dealing with a death. If I move on, it's like saying, I forget you, like you didn't mean anything to me. Or I won't remember you, or people won't remember you, or can I talk about you in my new life or with my new spouse or my new friends or whatever, however your life moves on. It's very hard, and sometimes we can anchor ourselves in the past in an effort to stay connected to those who've passed on.
Yeah, you're right there. I think it is a struggle for people in regards to carrying the loss of someone forward. And because one of the things I've learned through this and everything involved with the grief and potluck, um, going forward, is that grief is different for everybody.
Yes.
And it is difficult in that respect sometimes to grieve and then move forward. I mean, case in point, sadly, I'm going to bring it up. I was just watching clips. I hadn't watched it all week or anything about it. Was Prince Philip, the Queen's husband's funeral and passing. And you can see in the grief that, I mean, she has to bear visually because she is a, for lack of a word, icon in the scheme of who she is and a world leader. But the fact that, give her peace, I really wish they wouldn't have recorded her visually, like let the woman
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
But to try and move forward with her life, because coincidentally she has a birthday coming up. I saw something thrown up 2 hours ago on YouTube, so I'm like, well, poor girl,
Yeah.
for just average Joe. It doesn't matter who you are, queen or not, you've just dealt with the death of your lifelong partner, 70 odd years. I mean, goodness, nothing different.
Yeah, you don't know anything different. So, like, there was a speech she gave saying that he was the rock
Yeah,
of the family. People didn't see it because she's the one out front.
right.
73 years. I mean, that's most, she was married to him at 21. So that's a long, long time
Yes.
together.
Yes.
And
And
yes,
considering they're in their, I mean, he was 99, she's going to be 95. I mean, that's your lifetime essentially. So,
yes,
I mean, if only we could be so blessed to have a part. I am fortunate to have that partner now, but to carry on forward in the timeline you have, because you just don't know. Um, Now, to skip forward, so geography, I think, is important in a lot of respects to a story, and I find it interesting that you picked Waco only for the sake of, unfortunately, the bad memories. Like in my mind, because of my age factor, I think of the Waco and the Koresh compound situation and how
right.
unfortunate that tragedy was. And I know now, of course, that Waco's got, like you said, the Magnolia Empire. So fortunately, there is a light shining on Waco in that regard, in a better respect. So geography wise, it is interesting that an actual tornado did happen. So again, on timeline, I think that's really interesting how you tied those things together. And I mean, it's quite an eclectic triangle. So you go from Texas, New York to Florida.
And it was, and it was not easy getting everybody there.
I guess not, because I mean, everybody essentially ends up in Florida, so not everybody's taking the whole triangle in respect. They're going from Texas to Florida or from New York to Florida. But the fact that you've got like a triangle of geography,
Hmm.
usually you're just you're in the kitchen, like
Exactly, right?
we're all in
Usually everybody's in
grandmom's
one
kitchen
place.
baking
Mhm.
cookies, and then everything revolves around the kitchen, or the cookies or whatever. So yeah, good on the geography. So if you're not familiar with Florida geography, that is a fun thing, I think, to work on in books, and I think you did it well, because I mean, what can you say about Florida? It's hot, but
This is true.
yeah,
Unless you live on the coast, and then you
yes,
get a pretty good breeze.
yes,
But I just was walking before I came in to talk to you, and I think, what am I doing walking in my regular street clothes, my regular clothes, not my exercise clothes, at 5 o'clock in the evening, and it's 81 degrees. I'm
ah,
working here. What are you thinking? But
Well,
yeah, it's warm.
yes, yes. A book I just recently, well, I audibled it to be 100% because there's no way I could have read it. So just for fun on Florida landscape, it's called A Land Remembered by Patrick Smith, and I mean it really gives you the whole like cracker country situation with Florida landscape, and it can be like, it's just literally people just go beach. I mean, and of course when people go Florida they just think sunshine, puppy dogs, and rainbows. It's like, no, we have our crazy weather, we have things that happen, which I think you threw in a if I'm not mistaken, there is a hurricane in here too, right?
I was
Yes.
looking out for all kinds of ways
You were.
to just mirror things and tie things and cause I wanted to, that for anybody who's interested in writing, that was put into the story, one, because it actually really did happen. I was very blessed. I'm like, ooh, what do you know?
Mm-hmm.
I was researching and I found out about Hurricane Donna, but also, I wanted to tap into Everly's fears about
Ah.
the tornado. And even though a
Mm-hmm.
hurricane is much slower than a tornado, and you have plenty of time to evacuate and plenty
Mm-hmm.
of time to
Mm-hmm.
prepare. I've lived through 7 or 8 of them. You The idea of a big storm overtaking your life
Yes.
was really what it just, you can't always just go, well, that's not that's ridiculous. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the same thing. Your emotions get tied up into it. And she lived in those emotions for so long. It's not like she was going to flip a switch
Mm-hmm.
and be all better because she had decided to make a change in her life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because like in the aftermath of a tornado, or the tornado in her case, I mean, there is the consequences of that weather. And then in the aftermath of a hurricane, as we are aware as Floridians, you're living in the no electricity, lack of, ability to possibly even get around sometimes. And so your things of that you take for granted, like, I'm just gonna go to the store, now you can't, because, well, you can't, the power lines are down, you can't leave your driveway, you're kind of
Exactly.
stuck where you're
Exactly.
at. So yeah, you're either stuck or then slowly able to tread your way out. So I think, I guess metaphorically might be the right way to say it. You've put the weather in a good position with the juxtaposition of moving forward through the muck and the mire
Mm-hmm.
of grief, and how it can be different for, we've got Everly moving through it her way, we've got Beck moving through it her way, and then how that affects the people around them. So honestly, I mean, I'm going to say it again just because it's the title. It's called The Memory House, and it's by Rachel, Hauck.
Hauck.
Hauck. I don't like to butcher names because I've had two in my life that have just been fun. Current notwithstanding. So, yes. So this definitely, it's packed full. I mean, just looking at it, like you said, there might be the but I highly want to recommend, don't just pass this by. Sometimes we pass things by, but this one it's packed. It's packed full of goodies. It's got weather, it's got love, it's got everything. I mean, it
It
is
does.
just
It's got everything.
it's got
Yes.
everything. It's got a little bit of something something for everybody. It totally does. It doesn't disappoint in any stretch. You're captivated. I mean, I think I managed to breeze through this only because I still wasn't working in 9 to 5 at the time, and so I just went and couldn't put it down, because it really, with, like I said, the timelines, because sometimes you can get lost in the timelines. I didn't get lost. The weather, you can relate to the weather. You can feel the impact of the weather. I mean, that's there. Then, no matter what stage of life you're in, there is a literal stage of life for everybody in this book that is going through a portion of grief. So, I mean, Rachel, kudos.
Thank you.
And how this played out, and how everything came together. I mean, it's not easy. I've written just the tiniest novella, so I can't imagine writing as much prolifically as you do and getting to those different genres. So that definitely was a treat. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. It was really fun. At the end of the day, it's always fun to delve into different emotional layers that people go through, and just the vast landscape of humanity, the good, the bad, the highs, the lows. And in a story, it seems like, why does some character always dead? Like a parent's dead or someone dies in the story. And I'm not even writing murder mysteries. And I think because that's where the drama comes in, and that's where the heart comes in, and that's where you show characters are changing and growing, and that creates kind of an interesting palette. But also, so many people do face death, especially in the last year that we've had. A lot of people have
Mm-hmm.
faced death in one way or another. Either someone they know has died, or the fear of it. Even there was just such a fear at first in the beginning of the COVID.
Right, right.
So it's something that we can not shy away from.
Absolutely. To round off, is there any particular message you want to share with readers, potential readers? Just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right, right. I think to really, for me as an author who's writing in the Christian space, I would say, there's hope in God, and that's what I always want to try to convey in the story, hope.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm not writing a sermon, I'm not writing theology, I'm not intending to preach at anybody, but we all know people who have stories of hope. And so that's what I'm trying to do in a fiction setting with a little bit of hyperbole. And I would just say, know that God sees you and he knows you and he has a plan for you. I just spent a weekend with some writer friends, and one of them got really ill while she was here, and she actually had to spend 24 hours or so in the hospital.
Aw.
And yeah, but what looked like, oh my goodness, this is horrible, was God going, "Hey, I see you, and I'm working on your behalf." And by the time she came out, and she just knew God in a whole new way. She had a whole new hope. She had a whole new vision of what God had for her, and she was actually touched and healed. And so I think that that's my message: that if you're in a place of grief, just know that the Lord knows, and He will be there for you.
So true. So true. And thank you for that. I do appreciate that. Um, and so with that, I'm going to sign off here, but Rachel, stay on for 2 more minutes.
I will.
So, so again, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the Grief and Potluck podcast, the book that we were intrigued to read because we were reading a book in book club, and I'm like, I need a book for my book club. It's called The Memory House by Rachel Hauck, and it's delightful. It's I'm fascinated how the timeline worked out, how the geography plays into it, and especially the weather. That if anything else is just the fun part of it is the weather. So if you've never experienced a tornado, whew, you can in the book. So
Yes, you can.
you can definitely get into some
It's
weather without losing the electricity here. So
better to read about it than live through it.
absolutely. Definitely understand that 100%. So thank you so much for joining us. Please check out the website. Please check out the podcast. The podcast is Grief and Potluck, and the website is celebrationsoflifemagazine.com. Thank you so much.